Good evening, everyone. This is Walter Cronkite speaking to you from CBS television election headquarters here in New York City. The big election night, 1952, the year when the United States picks its 35th president. Balmy weather over most of the United States today and a record turnout apparently throughout the United States. We're going to be giving you all of the figures just as quickly as we can, the national totals, and then by states. We'll cover the congressional races, of course, of which there are many, 35 Senate races, and of course all of the House seats, 435. It takes some 266 electoral votes to win the presidency, you know. Electoral votes, the majority vote from each of the states, picks the electoral slate from that state, and they are cast on next December. But we'll know the results sometime tonight or early in the morning. Let's take a look now at the popular vote in the United States at this particular moment. For Governor Stevenson, the Democratic candidate from Illinois, 265,000 votes. For General Eisenhower, 282,000. In the electoral vote, 266 votes needed to win. Governor Stevenson is leading in 8 states with a total of 96 electoral votes. General Eisenhower is leading in 15 states with a total of 144 electoral votes. These, of course, are only scattered returns from all of these states. We have returns now from 23 states. The polls have closed at 8 o'clock in 30 states, mostly along the eastern seaboard and in the central time zone, and some 12 states close within the next hour. 42 states will be closed by 9 o'clock. Now let's take a look at the state returns as they're in at this moment, scattered returns from all of these states. Alabama, the Democrats showing the expected lead there, 6,100 to 3,000, with only scattered returns in. Arizona, no returns from Arizona yet, of course, out in the far west. Arkansas, no returns from that state as yet, nor are there any returns from California, of course. Polls do not close out there for another 3 hours. Colorado, we have no returns from there as yet, but here is a big state. Connecticut, a bellwether state in the east, with some 13% of the vote reported, and the Republicans have jumped into an early lead in the pendulum state of Connecticut. In Delaware, the Republicans hold a slight lead there with the very few precincts counted. And in Florida, where the Republicans are hoping to break into the solid South, the Republicans are indeed showing an early lead with nearly 10% of the vote counted. Most of those returns are from the southern resort counties of Florida, where the Republican strength was expected to be the strongest, but at least at the moment the Republicans have got an early lead in Florida. In Georgia, where the Democrats expect to hold on, they are doing so so far. In Idaho, we have no returns as yet. Illinois, Governor Stevenson's home state. The Democrats have jumped into an early lead, mostly thanks to Cook County, the area of Chicago. There the Democrats are running ahead by a 5-3 margin. They figure they need some 300,000 vote margin in Cook County to counterbalance normally Republican southern Illinois, and so far they seem to be on the way toward getting it in Illinois, although just scattered returns in at the moment. Next state, Indiana, and we have returns from part of Indiana showing the expected Republican strength there. Incidentally, in many of the precincts of Indiana, Governor Schricker, the Democrat running for the Senate, is running a little bit ahead of Senator Jenner in some precincts where General Eisenhower is running ahead of Governor Stevenson on the presidential ticket. In Iowa, no returns as yet, nor are there any from Kansas. Kentucky is showing a surprising lead for the Republican Party so far. However, this vote is mostly at the moment from the heavily Republican urban areas of Kentucky, but the Republicans have jumped into a rather heavy lead for that state at the moment. Louisiana, we have no reports there as yet. The Republicans hoping to break into the solid South there. Maine, the early reports indicate that the Republican state of Maine is going to stay in the Republican column, as it always has. In Maryland, that's another one of the bellwether pendulum states the Republicans are hoping to crack. The early returns are mostly from Baltimore, which should be heavily Democratic according to past performances, but so far the Democratic lead there is very narrow indeed. In Massachusetts, very scattered returns from Massachusetts So far, the polls there have just closed a few moments ago, and the Republicans have jumped into an early lead in Massachusetts, but quite scattered returns, as you see. Michigan, no returns as yet from that state. Minnesota, very scattered returns indeed. Minnesota does not close its polls for another hour. Mississippi, in that state, the Democrats are holding on to the kind of margin they expected to get down there. In Missouri, the polls have just closed and we have no returns as yet. Montana, the same thing applies, and it also applies in the state of Nebraska and in Nevada. Let's take a look now at New Hampshire, where the first returns have just come in from that state. The polls there just closed a moment ago. It is going Republican, as it has in the past and is expected to this year. New Jersey, the polls have just closed and we have no returns from New Jersey as yet, nor do we have any from New Mexico or New York State up to this moment. North Carolina, we have some returns that show the Democrats holding on to a reasonably heavy majority there. North Carolina is expected to go Democratic. The Republicans are showing some rather early strength in that southern state. North Dakota, we have no returns as yet, and from the state of Ohio. Early returns there show a the Republicans building up some majority. Those early returns are partly from the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, and that may be an indication there that the Democrats are in some trouble. They need to carry Cuyahoga and Cleveland by a pretty heavy majority, and nothing of the kind is indicated as yet from Ohio. Oklahoma, very scattered returns that show a very tight race down there, but of course quite scattered returns. Oregon, the polls don't close out in Oregon until 11 o'clock, our time in the east. Pennsylvania, we have no returns as yet. Rhode Island, we have very scattered early returns, which show the Republicans with a very heavy majority in these scattered returns in Rhode Island, although the Rhode Island is normally Democratic and has been counted in the Democratic column this year. So far, the Republicans have a lead there that, however, might account from a big city vote in Rhode Island. South Carolina. The South Carolina polls closed a couple of hours ago, and the Republicans are showing a large majority, a good lead in South Carolina, one of the states that the Republicans counted on cracking in the South, or thought they might crack, and so far with nearly a fourth of the vote counted in South Carolina, the first real trend seems to be indicated from any of the 48 states. There the Republicans running ahead by a rather sizable majority. South Dakota. We have very early returns from South Dakota showing an expected Republican strength there. Tennessee. Tennessee, the Democrats holding on to a very slim margin with the fourth of the state's vote counted. The margin not that the Democrats might have hoped for from their heavily populated areas of western Tennessee, where they expected to get a margin to counterbalance Republican eastern Tennessee. In Texas, we have no returns as yet. Utah, nothing from that state yet. Polls don't close out there for another couple of hours. Vermont, a strong Republican state, is expected to stay that way, but we have only scattered returns so far. Virginia, another state that the Republicans are counting on cracking in the South, and with some 7% reported, as you see, the Republicans have jumped into an early lead in Virginia. This might have been expected in Virginia, inasmuch as that early vote is counted in the strong Arlington County and Alexandria areas outside of Washington, D.C., where Republicans were expected to gain their largest strength. The state of Washington, we do not get returns there for another 3 hours, or at least the polls do not close there until 11 o'clock our time. West Virginia, where a Democratic sweep is expected, we see no returns as yet. Wisconsin. We have only early returns from Wisconsin, but as expected, the Republicans have jumped into an early lead in Wisconsin. Wyoming, we have no returns as yet. The Wyoming polls close in another hour's time. Let's take a look at the totals on the big board, the popular vote board so far. General Eisenhower is leading Governor Stevenson 392,000 to 369,000. The big board in back that you see, the map, that is our jigsaw map. The striped areas are Republican states where the Republican ticket is leading or has already won. Of course, that does not apply yet in any of them. The solid states are Democratic states. That board will be changing throughout the night. First postings are not yet fully completed on that board. In electoral votes, the Republicans lead. General Eisenhower leads in 15 states with a total of 137 electoral votes. As of this moment, Governor Stevenson leads in 9 states with a total of 111 electoral votes. The vote so far from everywhere, from every state, has indicated that there is going to be a record ballot cast this year. The previous record was in 1940, you know, when Roosevelt and Wilkie were running, and the total ballots counted that year were something over 49 million. This year, it looks like it may climb to as high as 60 million now. Registrations were up over 75 million. Reports from all states say that long lines have been standing at the polling places all day. Everybody's reporting record votes. It certainly will go up, it looks as if, to 55 million, and it might go up to 60 million. The popular count, you know, does not determine the presidency. The popular count for the United States as a whole, electoral counts do that. Each state has a number of electors, the same number as they have combination of representatives in the House and in the Senate. And on the balance of that weighted electoral vote, then we find the total number that the president gets at the end. On our big board, so far, with the very early returns in, only scattered, of course, nothing definite from any state. No state has been decided as yet. General Eisenhower is leading at this particular moment. He leads in 15 states with a total of 137 electoral votes, and Governor Stevenson leads in 9 states with a total of 111 electoral votes. Also, it should be noted that the big surprise so far in the returns in, as we read down our state list a moment ago, is South Carolina, where the Republicans are leading with nearly a quarter of the state's votes counted. That's the state where James Burns is the governor. He has declared for General Eisenhower, and it looks as if he may be carrying his state along with him. It looks as if General Eisenhower at this moment may be cracking the solid South in South Carolina at least. With the good weather over the United States today and the record vote turning out, it may weight some of these states much differently than they have been weighted in the past in their importance in this particular race. We're going to look in just a moment at our congressional races as they are shaping up at this moment, although in most of them there are not complete early returns by any means as yet. The presidential candidates are spending this evening watching the vote in their home areas. That is, General Eisenhower's home area counting for this purpose being New York City. He returned to his home on the Columbia University campus a little while ago. A motorcade took him down to his hotel headquarters, and we're going down there after a while for a look at the Republican headquarters where General Eisenhower is awaiting the result of this balloting today. Governor Stevenson went to Chicago today and cast his ballot in the suburb north of there. He waited 30 minutes in line. In case some of you people did to cast your vote, you know that Governor Stevenson did the same thing today. Waited 30 minutes to cast his vote, and he assured reporters that he cast his vote for a straight Democratic ticket. Incidentally, Mrs. Stevenson, the divorced wife of the governor, who earlier had announced out in Chicago in July when he was nominated that she would not vote for him, that she thought it was time for a change and would vote for the Republican candidate. Well, she went to the polls today, and first time she had voted on a election, on a voting machine, she stuck her head out of the voting booth and said, how do you vote a split ticket? Some indication that perhaps she may have changed her mind, and while voting for Republicans for other offices, has voted for Governor Stevenson for the presidency, although, of course, we don't know that. It's a secret ballot. We have only that small indication. Senator Nixon, the vice presidential candidate on the Republican ticket, is spending the evening in Los Angeles. He went out for a swim on the beach this afternoon to relax and is going to spend the time this evening in a hotel in Los Angeles watching the election returns. We're going to be back with more of the details in just a moment on how the election's going at this early hour of election night. And that is the national election picture up to this moment. Well, the election picture up to the moment in CBS television election headquarters. General Eisenhower has jumped into an early lead on popular vote and on electoral vote. He is now leading in some 15 states with a total of 337 electoral votes, and Governor Stevenson is leading in 9 states with a total of 111 electoral votes. The popular total, General Eisenhower 402,000, Governor Stevenson 398,000. Popular vote, not too much differential between the two candidates at this moment, but in electoral vote, a rather sizable one, as you know. As we noted a moment ago, the only really startling surprise so far in the returns is the heavy vote for General Eisenhower in South Carolina, which at this moment, with about a quarter of the vote counted in South Carolina, has put that state in General Eisenhower's column for the moment at least. The weather has been good throughout the United States today, the weather having brought out a record vote. Even the forest fire situation, which some politicians said might keep some of the farm vote down on the farm, fighting those fires, rather than getting out and casting the ballots, well, that situation was alleviated somewhat today by some rains around a few parts of the country yesterday, which cleared up the situation and put the brush in such shape that the farmers could get out and cast their votes. We now have returns from a total of 24 states. 30 states have closed their balloting up to this time. 12 more states will close their polls in the next 45 minutes. Looks as if we're going to get an early trend tonight, and it may not be very long before we see definitely which way the wind is blowing. The situation, of course, on the electoral vote situation is that the Republicans feel that they have to crack the solid South and then get to some of the big states like New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, perhaps California, to assure themselves a victory. The Democrats have to hold on to the solid South and the border states, and then if they can take 1 or 2 of the big ones besides and a scattering elsewhere, they find themselves on the victorious end of this election day, November 4th, 1952. So far, the big state vote has not come in to the extent where a trend can be determined. Only Illinois is showing any trend at the moment, and that's because of a heavy Cook County vote. That's the city of Chicago. There, the Democrats feel they need a 250 to 300,000 vote margin in order to win the state. And so far, they are running about 5 to 3 ahead in the Cook County balloting of the ahead of the Republicans. The previous Cook County margin for the Democrats has been around 54, 55, sometimes up to nearly 60%. 5 to 3 would put it considerably ahead of that figure, of course. So Governor Stevenson may be in fairly good shape in his own home state. The Republicans had thought that perhaps last minute Eisenhower's strength would show up there and actually take Governor Stevenson's state away from him. That, of course, is still a possibility. We have a very small percentage of the vote counted in Illinois, only 3%. The Democrats themselves were said to be a little bit worried about that state. New York and Pennsylvania, New York with its big 45 electoral votes, Pennsylvania with 32, California with 32, Illinois with some 27. Those are the states to watch tonight, and also those southern states. If the Republicans crack the South, they will be a long way toward the victory that they feel they need for in this particular election year. This is our CBS television headquarters, and this is the CBS television network. Early scattered returns from the eastern part of the United States. 24 states reporting part of their precincts in give General Eisenhower an early lead, 402,000 to 398,000. General Eisenhower leading in 15 states with 137 electoral votes. Governor Stevenson leading in 9 with 111 electoral votes. And now for perhaps a prediction on how this voting is going, what the vote that is in so far means. Let's turn to that miracle of the modern age, the electronic brain UNIVAC, and Charles Collingwood.
This is the face of a UNIVAC. A UNIVAC is a fabulous electronic machine which we have borrowed to help us predict this election from the basis of the early returns as they come in. UNIVAC is going to try to predict the winner for us just as early as we can possibly get the returns in. UNIVAC lives down in Philadelphia. He's one of a family of electronic brains made by the Eckert-Mauchly division of Remington Rand. And in a little while we'll go down there and take a look at it. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the theory of this. This is not a joke or a trick. It's an experiment. We think it's going to work. We don't know. We hope it'll work. At any rate, for the last 6 weeks or so, some 25 mathematicians, statisticians, and researchers, including some of the country's best mathematical brains, have been working on the problem which we've given to this electronic brain to try to solve for us tonight. You know, the theory is pretty simple. It is that if you knew all about previous elections, if you knew how the votes came in and so forth, then as the votes come in this election, you ought to be able to compare them with what happened in the past and judge what the result will be tonight. However, if you were going to do that, it would take all the people in this room plus a couple hundred more with pencils and papers adding up figures, and there just aren't that many people and that many good calculators to do it. But this thing, this UNIVAC, it can add 2,000 separate additions in 1 second. It can make 500 multiplications, 250 divisions, and do all sorts of other complicated things. So we hope, as the evening goes on, to get you a prediction from UNIVAC based on statistical principles of the result of this election as it happens. Now, as I say, if it does give a wrong answer, if it does make a mistake, it won't be the machine which does it. It will be some fault of ours, some assumption that we made, something we didn't foresee in giving it the figures. So let's go down to Philadelphia and take a look at the UNIVAC that's going to be working for us tonight. As I say, this is the face of a UNIVAC. And in Philadelphia, the UNIVAC there has a similar face, as you can see. It's there with its operator, James McGarvey, who tells it from this control panel what UNIVAC is supposed to do and can tell by the lights flashing what it is doing. He pushes those keys and punches the buttons and tells it what to do. On the right of the UNIVAC, there's something which looks like a typewriter. That's the way UNIVAC talks. When he wants to say something, the keys move with no hand touching them, and UNIVAC says his piece. That's the way he communicates to us, through that typewriter there. And it's on that typewriter, which moves without any human agency, that we hope UNIVAC will give us his predictions. Can you say something, UNIVAC? Have you got anything to say to the television audience? You're a very impolite machine, I must say. But he's an awfully rapid calculator. There he goes. What's he saying? I think he's saying hi anyway. Well, that's just part of UNIVAC. Along the side of the room in which he's housed are a series of cabinets containing reels of metallic tape. Those are called the uniservos. You see those round things over there look kind of like candy mints? Well, those are reels of metallic tape which contain some of the information he has to have. They can feed information to UNIVAC at the rate of about 10,000 numbers a second. And what's more, UNIVAC can assimilate it. Now, back in the opposite the control room in the back of the board is the brain of UNIVAC. I think we can see inside all those tubes and things. And inside there's some spiny things which are mercury tanks. their UNIVAC's memory. He can remember 15 million digits or alphabetical characters. He's got a brain that would put to shame the whole race of elephants. Just try 15 million digits on a herd of elephants. I'll bet they can't even remember 1 million. In there is where UNIVAC remembers hour by hour all the returns of the 48 and 44 elections. It's quite a machine. And as a matter of fact, you know, I got so interested in telling you about UNIVAC, I forgot to ask him what his prediction is. UNIVAC, can you tell us what your prediction is now on the basis of the returns that we've had so far? Have you got a prediction for us, UNIVAC? I don't know. I think that UNIVAC is probably an honest machine, a good deal more honest than a lot of commentators who are working, and he doesn't think he's got enough to tell us anything about yet. But we'll be back with him later in the evening. Now back to Walter Cronkite.
And we've got returns now from some 27 states so far. Very scattered returns, of course, but on the basis of those scattered returns, Governor Stevenson is leading in 10 states with 114 electoral votes. General Eisenhower is leading. I can't see it if the boy could move over. General Eisenhower leading in 17 states with 154 electoral votes. Now, what about the congressional races? Let's have a word about those, and for that we turn to Doug Edwards.
Righto, Walter, here we are. We're getting some interesting results in from the state of Connecticut. As a matter of fact, that is the senatorial story at the moment. We can get a little close-up in here on this Ribicoff-Prescott-Bush race. We see that the Republican, Mr. Bush, is ahead of Ribicoff, the Democrat. And down here in that other crucial race in the state of Connecticut, it's William Benton versus Purtell. You know, Mr. Benton is the man who's had the big fight with McCarthy, and Purtell, the Republican, is leading 57,200 to Benton's 38,000 on the basis of these 25% of the precincts are in right now. Most of these returns are coming from upstate Hartford, which normally is Democratic. And that's the way the picture goes on those two races in Connecticut right now, with 25% of the precincts reporting Republicans leading in both of them. In Kentucky, it's the Republican ahead there again, Sherman Cooper versus Underwood. You see the figure. Let's see, nothing from the state of Michigan, but let's move on up the scattered returns from the Delaware race. 152 for the Republican, Senator Williams, 49 for Baird. Over here on the far side of our board, we have the results so far in only 1% of the vote in the McCarthy versus Fairchild race, 377 to 189. No factor whatsoever, but the Republican, excuse me, the McCarthy gentleman is leading at the moment. I got a cut sign now.
The popular vote on the presidency at the moment. Governor Stevenson, 575,000. General Eisenhower, 655,000, with scattered returns from 27 states. Governor Stevenson leading in 10 states with electoral vote of 114. General Eisenhower leading in 17 states with a total of 154 electoral votes. Now, I'm not sure that Doug Edwards finished his chore over there. Did he finish with the senatorial races at the moment? Presumably he has. We're looking forward to a record vote this year. Looks as if Americans turned out in numbers to register their feelings about the government. Some 55 to 60,000 votes are expected over the country as a whole. Generally fair weather throughout the country helped bring out this record vote. We've had some rather startling results so far. South Carolina, for instance, is showing General Eisenhower in the lead with better than a quarter of the votes counted in South Carolina, although the most recent return from South Carolina showed a slight gain for Governor Stevenson, although he hasn't overtaken General Eisenhower by any means there as yet. In Connecticut, a rather heavy Republican majority has been building up as that state's count from voting machines has been tabulated. Some quarter of the votes counted, and the Republicans running ahead, as you see. In Danbury, General Eisenhower ran ahead by some 3,000 votes, and that's normally a pendulum area which has shown a slight favoritism toward the Democratic side in the past. In Hartford, Connecticut, the Democratic lead has run around 20,000 so far. That's a fairly sizable lead in Hartford, but the vote not completed up there as yet. None of these figures, we should emphasize, can be taken as anything like final as yet. All of these states, the best we have for many is about 1/4 of the votes counted. Scattered returns indeed. Not enough to indicate a sharp trend in any direction. Just a moment, we are going to bring in Lowell Thomas, who was here just a moment ago. Everywhere where the news breaks, you find Lowell Thomas, of course, and election night is no exception in CBS television headquarters. I'm wondering what Lowell's thoughts are in this 1952 election so far. Lowell?
Well, Walter, I'll put on this gadget. Is that all right? Then I'll answer your question.
Good.
I'm not actually thinking about returns at this hour. I'm more interested in what's going on around me here in this house of television. It seems to me that television has certainly come into its own this year. At the previous election night 4 years ago, why, it was a case of television portraying radio. But this time, everything seems to be specially designed just for television. And if those of you who are looking in will come along with me for a moment or two, I'd like to take you on a tour of this establishment. We'll leave Walter Cronkite for a moment and walk over to the focal center, the main news desk. This is where Mr. Littlejohn sits.